The rain hammered against the windshield of Marcus Thompson's aging Ford pickup truck as he navigated through the flooded streets of Asheville, North Carolina. It was nearly midnight on a Tuesday in late October, and the autumn storm had transformed the usually peaceful mountain roads into rivers of chaos. Marcus squinted through the downpour, his knuckles white against the steering wheel, thinking only of getting home to his 8-year-old daughter, Sophie. He'd just finished a double shift at the warehouse, 16 hours of loading and unloading freight that left his lower back screaming and his military injury throbbing. At 42, Marcus carried the weight of Afghanistan in his right knee, a souvenir from an IED blast that ended his army career 6 years ago. But tonight, the physical pain was nothing compared to the guilt gnawing at him. Sophie was alone at their small rental house, probably asleep on the couch waiting for him, her homework spread around her like always. The divorce had been finalized 8 months ago. Jennifer had moved to Charlotte with her new boyfriend, leaving Marcus with full custody, not because she'd fought for Sophie, but because she hadn't fought at all. "I need to find myself," she'd said, as if their daughter was an obstacle to self-discovery. Marcus had stopped being angry about it. Now he was just tired. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the road ahead for a split second. That's when Marcus saw them. Twisted metal, scattered debris, and bodies on the asphalt. His combat training kicked in before his mind could fully process the scene. 3 motorcycles had collided near the entrance to Mercy General Hospital, their riders thrown across the road like broken dolls. Marcus slammed on the brakes, his truck hydroplaning slightly before coming to a stop. He threw the vehicle into park and jumped out into the storm, rain immediately soaking through his warehouse uniform. The wind howled around him, carrying the metallic smell of blood mixed with gasoline. The first rider was a young woman, maybe 25, lying face down in a growing pool of rainwater tinged with red. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, his hands automatically checking for a pulse. There, weak but present. He carefully turned her onto her side, supporting her neck, and saw the deep gash across her forehead. Her leather jacket was shredded on one side, revealing road rash that made his stomach turn. "Stay with me," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. 20 feet away, a man in his 50s groaned, trying to sit up. His leg was bent at an unnatural angle, and even in the rain, Marcus could see the bone protruding through torn jeans. The man's face was ghostly pale, his breathing rapid and shallow, clear signs of shock. The third rider was further down the road, motionless. A kid, couldn't be more than 19, wearing a helmet that had cracked down the middle. Marcus's heart sank. He'd seen enough death to recognize its stillness, but he pushed the thought away. Check first. Assume nothing. Marcus looked toward the hospital entrance, barely visible through the sheets of rain. It was right there, maybe 100 yards, but the storm had knocked out the streetlights, and he could see that the emergency entrance was dark, except for emergency generator lights flickering weakly. No ambulance sat waiting. No staff ran out to help. The storm had probably overwhelmed them with other emergencies. He made a split-second decision. His phone was dead. Had died during his shift and he'd forgotten to charge it in the truck. No time to run into the hospital and back. These people were dying right now. Marcus ran to his truck and pulled out the wool blankets he kept in the back, emergency supplies from his military days. He spread one beside the young woman, then carefully lifted her. She was lighter than his combat gear had been, but his knee protested anyway, sending sharp pains up his leg. He ignored it. "I've got you," he whispered, carrying her toward his truck. He laid her as gently as possible in the back seat, propping her head on one of his spare work shirts. Blood seeped onto the upholstery, but Marcus didn't care. The truck was 12 years old anyway. He ran back for the older man, who had started screaming, finally processing his injury. "My leg! Oh God, my leg!" "Sir, I need you to stay calm," Marcus said, kneeling beside him. Rain poured down both their faces. "I'm going to get you to the hospital. I'm a veteran. I know what I'm doing. But I need you to trust me and try not to move that leg. The man's eyes were wide with panic and pain, but he nodded, teeth chattering. Marcus carefully slid his arms under the man's shoulders and knees, avoiding the injured leg as much as possible. The man screamed anyway, a sound that cut through the storm. Marcus felt the weight of him, at least 200 pounds, and his knee buckled slightly. He gritted his teeth, using muscles memory from carrying wounded soldiers, and made it to the truck. He laid the man across the back bench seat with the woman, knowing it wasn't ideal, but having no choice. "Hang on," he told them both. 2 minutes. The youngest rider was last. As Marcus approached, he saw the kid's chest rising and falling, shallow but alive. Thank God. The boy's eyes opened slightly as Marcus reached him. Don't move me," the kid mumbled through split lips. "Learned. In school. Spinal injury." "I know, son," Marcus said softly. "But you're dying here. The hospital is right there. I'll be careful." The kid's eyes rolled back, and he went limp. Marcus carefully stabilized the head and neck as best he could, wishing desperately for a proper spine board. He'd done this in combat zones, but never alone, never in a storm like this, never without proper equipment. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. He lifted the kid, who couldn't have weighed more than 150 pounds, and carried him to the front passenger seat, reclining it back and securing him with the seatbelt. The kid's helmet was still on, too risky to remove. Marcus jumped into the driver's seat, water pouring from his clothes onto the floor. He started the engine and drove the 100 yards to the ER entrance, laying on the horn. The automatic doors were locked, operating on emergency power. Marcus left the engine running and ran to the doors, pounding with both fists. "Help! I've got 3 critical patients. Motorcycle accident!" A security guard appeared, eyes wide at the sight of Marcus. Soaking wet, covered in blood that wasn't his own, desperation written across his face. "Open the door, now!" The guard fumbled with his keys, and suddenly the doors opened. Marcus ran back to his truck, just as 2 nurses emerged, followed by a doctor. "Multiple traumas," Marcus shouted over the storm. "Woman, probable head injury and road rash. Man, compound leg fracture going into shock. Kid, possible spinal injury, unconscious. All 3 need immediate attention." The medical team sprang into action, rushing to the truck with a gurney. Marcus helped them transfer the young woman first, then the older man who was barely conscious now, then the kid. Within minutes, all 3 were being wheeled into the ER, leaving Marcus standing alone in the rain next to his blood-stained truck. His hands were shaking now, the adrenaline starting to fade. A nurse touched his arm. "Sir, are you injured?" Marcus looked down at himself, covered in blood and road debris, water dripping from every part of him. "No, it's not my blood. You need to come inside. You're in shock." "I need to get home," Marcus said, thinking of Sophie. "My daughter's alone." "Sir, you just saved 3 lives. Please, at least come in for a few minutes. Warm up. We'll call someone for your daughter." Marcus wanted to argue, but his knee gave out, and he stumbled. The nurse caught him, and suddenly he was being guided into the hospital, into the warmth, into the fluorescent light that seemed too bright after the darkness of the storm. They sat him in a wheelchair. He didn't remember sitting, and wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. Someone brought him coffee. Someone else took his information. A social worker called his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who promised to check on Sophie immediately. The storm raged outside the windows, but inside, everything moved in a strange, slow motion. Marcus watched the trauma team work through a window, saw them cutting away the kid's jacket, saw the rapid movements that meant they were fighting for his life. He'd done his part. Now it was up to them. A police officer appeared, asking questions about the accident. Marcus answered mechanically. Location, what he'd seen, what he'd done. The officer looked at him with something like awe. "You carried all 3 of them? By yourself?" Marcus nodded. "Didn't have a choice. That's a hell of a thing, man. You're a hero." Marcus shook his head. "I'm a father who's late getting home to his daughter." But he stayed because leaving felt wrong. He stayed until the doctor came out 2 hours later and told him all 3 would survive. The woman had a severe concussion but would recover. The man would need surgery on his leg but was stable. The kid, his name was Tyler, Marcus learned, had 2 fractured vertebrae but no spinal cord damage. He'd walk again. "You got them here in time," the doctor said. "Another 10 minutes, maybe 15, and we'd be having a different conversation, especially Tyler." Marcus just nodded, too exhausted to feel pride or relief or anything except bone-deep weariness. It was nearly 3 in the morning when he finally drove home through the dying storm. His truck's interior was ruined, the seats stained dark with blood. He'd have to clean it tomorrow, or the next day, or never. Sophie was asleep on the couch when he walked in, Mrs. Chen dozing in the armchair beside her. The old woman woke when she heard him. "Oh, Marcus, you're soaking wet. And is that blood?" "It's okay, Mrs. Chen. Thank you for staying with her." After Mrs. Chen left, Marcus stood in his living room, dripping onto the old carpet, watching his daughter sleep. She looked so peaceful, so small. In 8 hours, she'd wake up and need breakfast. She'd need him to braid her hair for school. She'd need him to sign the permission slip for the field trip she'd been excited about all week. He was so tired he could barely stand, but he smiled, because he'd be there for all of it. That's what mattered. Marcus limped to the bathroom, peeled off his ruined clothes, and stood under the hot shower until the water ran clear. Tomorrow would be another long day. But tonight, 3 people were alive who might not have been. That had to count for something. Marcus woke to Sophie shaking his shoulder, her small hand persistent against his arm. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of his bedroom, and for a moment he couldn't remember why every muscle in his body screamed in protest. "Daddy, you're going to be late for work," Sophie's voice cut through the fog in his brain. "And you didn't set out my clothes." It all came rushing back. The storm, the accident, the blood. Marcus groaned and checked his phone. 7:45 a.m. His shift at the warehouse started at 8. He'd gotten maybe 3 hours of sleep. "Sophie, baby, give me just a minute," he mumbled, forcing himself to sit up. His knee was swollen to twice its normal size, an angry purple-red color that meant he'd really done a number on it last night. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain radiating up his leg. "Are you okay, Daddy? You're moving funny." "Just sore, sweetheart. Old army injury acting up." Marcus limped through their morning routine in a haze, helping Sophie pick out clothes, making her oatmeal with brown sugar the way she liked it, braiding her hair while sitting down because standing was agony. He called his supervisor at the warehouse and explained he'd be late, earning a lecture about responsibility that he barely heard. "Why is there blood in the truck?" Sophie asked as he drove her to school, her observant eyes missing nothing. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He'd planned to clean it before she saw, but exhaustion had won. "I helped some people who were hurt last night, during the storm. Like a superhero?" Despite everything, Marcus smiled. "No, baby. Just did what anyone would do." After dropping Sophie at Asheville Elementary, Marcus drove to the warehouse and pushed through his shift on pure stubbornness and 4 cups of terrible breakroom coffee. His supervisor, Dale, kept shooting him suspicious looks, but didn't say anything about his limp or the way he winced every time he bent down. It was nearly noon when his phone rang, an unknown local number. "Is this Marcus Thompson?" a woman's voice asked. "Speaking. Mr. Thompson, this is Jennifer Carlisle from Channel 7 News. We heard about what you did last night at Mercy General Hospital, and we'd like to interview you for our evening broadcast. Our viewers would love to hear about your heroic actions." "No, thank you," Marcus interrupted. "Not interested. Mr. Thompson, you saved 3 lives. Don't you think their families would want to thank you? Don't you think you deserve recognition for—" Marcus hung up. He didn't want recognition. He wanted his knee to stop hurting and enough money to fix his truck and maybe 8 uninterrupted hours of sleep. But Jennifer Carlisle was apparently not easily discouraged. By the time Marcus picked up Sophie from school, his phone had rung 12 more times. Reporters, radio stations, even a podcast host. He ignored them all. "Daddy, Mrs. Rodriguez said you're famous, Sophie announced, bouncing in her seat as they drove home. She showed us on her phone. You're on the news. Marcus's stomach sank. Sophie, I'm not famous. I just helped some people. It said you saved 3 people all by yourself and that you're a veteran. Mrs. Rodriguez said veterans are heroes. Baby, listen to me. Marcus pulled into their driveway and turned to face his daughter. What I did last night was just being a decent person. I'm not special. I don't want to be on TV or in the news. I just want to go to work, take care of you, and live our life, okay? Sophie's face fell slightly, but she nodded. Okay, Daddy. Inside their small house, Marcus collapsed onto the couch while Sophie did her homework at the kitchen table. He managed to doze off for a few minutes before his phone rang again. This time, it was a number he recognized. Mercy General Hospital. Mr. Thompson, this is Dr. Sarah Hendricks from Mercy General. I was the attending physician last night. Marcus sat up straighter, his heart rate picking up. Are the patients okay? They're all stable, which is why I'm calling. The families want to meet you. They've been asking about you all day, the man who saved their loved ones. Would you be willing to come by the hospital tomorrow? Marcus rubbed his face. I don't know, Doctor. I'm not really comfortable with... Mr. Thompson, Tyler Morrison, the youngest rider, has been asking for you specifically. He's awake now and he remembers you talking to him. He wants to thank you. Something in Marcus's chest tightened. The kid was alive and talking. He's really okay? He's going to make a full recovery. But I think seeing you would mean a lot to him and to the other patients. You don't have to make a big thing of it, just a quick visit. Marcus looked over at Sophie, who was watching him with curious eyes. Can I bring my daughter? Of course. The next afternoon, Marcus and Sophie walked through the main entrance of Mercy General Hospital. Marcus had showered, shaved, and put on his only decent pair of jeans and a clean button-down shirt. Sophie wore her favorite dress, the yellow one with sunflowers that her mother had bought her before the divorce. Dr. Hendricks met them in the lobby, a tall woman in her 50s with kind eyes and grey-streaked hair pulled back in a bun. Mr. Thompson, thank you so much for coming. And this must be Sophie. Yes, ma'am, Sophie said, suddenly shy. The families are waiting in the conference room. They wanted to meet you together, if that's okay. Marcus nodded, his stomach churning with anxiety. He didn't know why this felt harder than carrying injured people through a storm, but it did. The conference room was on the 2nd floor, and when Dr. Hendricks opened the door, Marcus found himself facing a crowd of people, at least 15, maybe more. They all turned to look at him, and for a moment the silence was overwhelming. Then a woman in her 50s stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Are you Marcus, the man who saved my son? Before Marcus could answer, she wrapped her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder. Thank you so much. They said Tyler would have died if you hadn't gotten him here when you did. Other people were crying now, too. An older couple holding hands, a young man with the same eyes as the injured woman Marcus had pulled from the road. They took turns hugging him, thanking him, telling him about their loved ones. The older man, whose leg Marcus had carried, was there in a wheelchair, his leg in a cast up to his hip. Son, I'm Robert Morrison, Tyler's dad. You saved both of us last night. I don't know how to repay you. There's nothing to repay, Marcus managed to say, overwhelmed by the emotion in the room. I did what anyone would do. No, a woman said firmly. She was the mother of the injured young woman. Not anyone. Most people would have driven past. Most people would have called 911 and waited. You risked yourself to save strangers. Sophie tugged on Marcus's hand. Can we see the people you saved, Daddy? Dr. Hendricks smiled. Tyler and Jessica, that's his daughter, are both able to have visitors. Rachel is still in ICU, but she's stable. They visited Tyler first. The kid was in a private room, his head bandaged and his neck in a brace, but his eyes were bright when he saw Marcus. Dude, Tyler said, his voice raspy, you're insane. My mom said you carried me through a hurricane. Marcus laughed despite himself. It was just a storm. And you're going to be okay. That's all that matters. The doctor said I could have been paralyzed or dead. Tyler's voice cracked. You didn't even know me and you risked everything. I have a daughter, Marcus said simply, glancing at Sophie. I'd hoped someone would do the same for her. They talked for a few more minutes before Tyler's energy flagged and they moved on to Jessica's room. She was 27, a graduate student at UNC Asheville, and the road rash on her arms and face made her wince with every movement. But she smiled when she saw Marcus. I remember your voice, she said. You told me to stay with you. I held on to that, even when everything went black. After the visits, the families gathered again in the conference room. Robert Morrison cleared his throat. We've all been talking and we want to do something for you. We've started a GoFundMe. No, Marcus said immediately. Absolutely not. I don't want money. Your truck is damaged, Jessica's mother pointed out. We saw the pictures. The seats are ruined. I'll clean it or get seat covers. Really, I don't need... What about college? Tyler's mother asked, looking at Sophie. Wouldn't you want help saving for her education? Marcus felt his defenses weakening. Sophie was smart, so smart, and he'd lain awake countless nights worrying about how he'd ever afford to send her to college on a warehouse worker's salary. We're not doing this to make you uncomfortable, Robert said gently. We're doing it because our children are alive because of you. Let us give back in some small way. Marcus looked down at Sophie, who was holding his hand tightly. She smiled up at him, and he saw his mother's eyes looking back at him. The grandmother Sophie had never met, who'd raised Marcus to help people, who'd taught him that strength meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Okay, he said quietly, for Sophie. Thank you. The local news had somehow caught wind of the meeting, and when Marcus and Sophie left the hospital, there were 3 news vans parked outside. Marcus tried to hurry past them, but reporters rushed forward with microphones and cameras. Mr. Thompson, can you tell us what went through your mind when you saw the accident? Is it true you're a combat veteran? How does it feel to be called a hero? Marcus stopped. Sophie pressed against his side and looked directly at the closest camera. I'm not a hero. Heroes are people who do extraordinary things. What I did was ordinary human decency. If you want to do something useful, go donate blood, volunteer at a shelter, help your neighbor. That's what heroes do, everyday things that help people. Now please, I need to get my daughter home. He pushed through the crowd, protecting Sophie, and got her into his truck. As they drove away, he saw the reporters still filming. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Marcus sat at their small kitchen table and opened his laptop. The GoFundMe page Robert had mentioned was already at $12,000. Marcus stared at the number, tears burning his eyes. The comments section was full of strangers thanking him, calling him a hero, sharing their own stories of veterans who'd helped them. One comment stopped him cold. My brother was killed in Afghanistan. Thank you for making it home and for still protecting people. He would have done the same thing. Marcus closed the laptop and walked to Sophie's room. She was sprawled across her bed, one arm hanging off the side, her nightlight casting soft shadows across her face. He watched her breathe, this small person who was his entire world. Tomorrow he'd go back to the warehouse. Tomorrow he'd ice his knee and clean his truck and help Sophie with her math homework. Tomorrow he'd be just Marcus again, not the hero the news was making him out to be. But tonight, he let himself feel it. The weight of what he'd done, the lives he'd changed, the ripples spreading out in ways he'd never fully understand. Maybe he wasn't a hero, but maybe, just for one night in a storm, he'd been enough. 2 weeks after the accident, Marcus stood in the parking lot of a Toyota dealership, staring at a used truck that cost less than half of what the GoFundMe had raised. Sophie was at school, and he had the afternoon off. A rare gift from Dale after the warehouse owner had seen the news coverage and decided Marcus's heroism was good for the company's image. She's a 2018 model, runs great, only 60,000 miles, the salesman was saying, But Marcus barely heard him. He was thinking about the blood-stained Ford sitting in his driveway, the one he'd finally admitted was beyond salvaging. The seats couldn't be cleaned. Every time he sat in it, he smelled copper and rain. "I'll take it," Marcus said, interrupting the sales pitch. The salesman blinked. "Don't you want to test drive it first? I trust you." 3 hours later, Marcus drove off the lot in a truck that didn't carry ghosts. The GoFundMe had raised $47,000 before he'd asked them to close it. After buying the truck, he'd put $35,000 into a college fund for Sophie. The rest would help with rent and groceries. Maybe let him take Sophie somewhere special for her birthday. His phone rang as he drove towards Sophie's school. Dr. Hendricks from the hospital. "Mr. Thompson, I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all, Doctor. I wanted to let you know that Rachel Wilson was discharged today. She's the last of the 3 patients. They're all home now, all recovering." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying for 2 weeks without realizing it. "That's wonderful news. There's something else. The hospital board wants to honor you at a ceremony next month. Nothing big, just a small gathering to... Dr. Hendricks, I appreciate it, but I really don't want any more attention." There was a pause. "Mr. Thompson, can I speak candidly?" "Of course. I've been a trauma surgeon for 27 years. I've seen countless acts of bravery, EMTs, firefighters, regular people who step up in emergencies. But what you did was different. You had every reason to keep driving. You were injured yourself, exhausted, worried about your daughter. But you stopped. You carried 3 people through a dangerous storm, one at a time, damaging your own body in the process. And then you disappeared without wanting anything in return." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. "The reason we want to honor you isn't to make you uncomfortable. It's because people need to see that someone like you exists. In a world that feels increasingly dark, you remind us what human beings are capable of when we choose to help instead of look away. You don't have to accept, but please think about it." After they hung up, Marcus sat in the school parking lot, watching parents arrive to pick up their children. Most of them had probably driven past accidents before. Most of them had probably kept going, assuming someone else would help, that it wasn't their responsibility. He couldn't judge them for it. 3 weeks ago, he might have done the same thing. He'd been so focused on getting home to Sophie, so exhausted from working double shifts, so wrapped up in his own struggles. But something that night, the rain, the lightning, the way the young woman's hand had twitched as if reaching for help, had cut through all of that. Sophie burst through the school doors with her usual energy, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She spotted the new truck and stopped, confused, before recognizing Marcus in the driver's seat. "You got a new truck!" she squealed, running over. "The old one was done, baby. What do you think?" "It's blue. I like blue." She climbed into the passenger seat, immediately investigating all the buttons and compartments. "Does this one have Bluetooth? Can we play my music?" Marcus laughed, helping her buckle up. "Yeah, we can play your music." As they drove home, Sophie chattering about her day, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in months. Contentment. Not happiness exactly. That still felt out of reach since the divorce, but a sense that things might actually be okay. That evening after dinner, there was a knock at the door. Marcus opened it to find Tyler Morrison standing on his porch, his neck brace gone, looking healthier than he had in the hospital. "Hey, Mr. Thompson. Hope it's okay I stopped by. My dad gave me your address." "Tyler, come in." Marcus stepped aside and Sophie looked up from her homework with interest. "Is that the boy you saved, Daddy?" Tyler grinned. "Yeah, I'm the boy your dad saved. You must be Sophie. He talked about you in the hospital." Sophie beamed, and Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. Tyler pulled a folder from his backpack. "So, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a design student at UNC Asheville. Or, I was. I'm taking this semester off to recover. Anyway, I wanted to thank you properly." He handed Marcus the folder. Inside was a pencil drawing, incredibly detailed, almost photorealistic. It showed Marcus carrying someone through rain, his face set with determination. water and darkness all around him. But in the background, breaking through the storm clouds, was light. "Tyler, I don't know what to say. You saved my life. I wanted to give you something that mattered, something that showed what I saw in you that night, even through the pain and the fear. You were like this force, this unstoppable force that wasn't going to let us die." Marcus stared at the drawing, seeing himself through Tyler's eyes. Was this who he'd been that night? This strong, determined figure? "Can I keep this?" Marcus asked, his voice rough. "It's yours. I made it for you." They talked for an hour about Tyler's recovery, his plans to return to school next semester, his newfound appreciation for life. Before he left, Tyler hugged Marcus tightly. "You gave me a second chance," Tyler said. "I'm not going to waste it." After Tyler left, Marcus pinned the drawing on the refrigerator, right next to Sophie's artwork and the permission slip for her field trip. Sophie stood beside him, studying the image. "You look like a superhero in this picture," she said. "I'm just your dad, baby." "Yeah, but you're my dad, and you're pretty cool." Marcus pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling her small arms around his waist. This was what mattered. Not the news coverage, not the GoFundMe, not the ceremony Dr. Hendricks wanted to hold. Just this, being here, being present, being the father Sophie deserved. The next morning, Marcus woke to find an email from Dale at the warehouse. The subject line read, "Opportunity." Marcus opened it cautiously. Dale wasn't exactly known for his generosity. "Marcus, the corporate office saw the news coverage. They want to offer you a position in safety management at our Charlotte facility. Better pay, better hours, benefits. You'd start in January. Think it over." Marcus read the email 3 times, his mind racing. Charlotte was where Jennifer lived, but it was also where better opportunities existed, better schools for Sophie. A chance to use his military experience in a real career instead of just loading boxes. Actual health insurance. But it meant leaving Asheville, the only place that had felt like home since he'd left the army. It meant uprooting Sophie from her school, her friends, the stability they'd finally found. He called his neighbor Mrs. Chen, who'd become something of a surrogate grandmother to Sophie since the divorce. "What do you think I should do?" he asked her over coffee that afternoon while Sophie was at school. Mrs. Chen smiled, her weathered face crinkling with wisdom. "Marcus, you spent one night proving you're willing to sacrifice everything to save strangers. Don't you think you owe it to yourself and Sophie to take an opportunity that could save your future? But starting over again is scary. Of course it is, but you're not running away from something this time. You're running towards something better. There's a difference." That evening, Marcus sat Sophie down for a serious conversation. "Baby, how would you feel about moving? Not right away, but maybe after Christmas. To Charlotte." Sophie's face went through several emotions. Surprise, confusion, worry. "But my friends are here, and Mrs. Chen, and my school." "I know, and we'd visit. But I got offered a new job, a better job, with better money. We could afford a nicer place. You could pick your own room, decorate it however you want. Would Mum be there?" Marcus's heart clenched. "Yeah, Mum's in Charlotte. We could see her more if you wanted." Sophie thought about this, her small face serious. "Would you be home more? Would you have to work double shifts?" "No, baby, better hours. I'd be home for dinner every night." Sophie bit her lip, considering. Then she nodded. "Okay, if you think it's best." Marcus pulled her close. "We're a team, you and me. We'll make it work." 2 days later, Marcus called Dr. Hendricks and told her he'd attend the ceremony. If people needed to see that ordinary people could do extraordinary things, then maybe sharing his story was another way of helping. Not the help he was comfortable with, but help nonetheless. The ceremony was held on a Saturday afternoon in the hospital's community room. Marcus wore the one suit he owned, bought for his wedding and worn only twice since, once for the wedding, once for the divorce hearing. Sophie wore her sunflower dress again, her hair in the elaborate braids Mrs. Chen had helped with. The room was packed, Hospital staff, the 3 patients and their families, local community leaders, and more reporters than Marcus would have liked. He stood at the front, next to Dr. Hendricks, feeling every eye on him. The hospital administrator spoke first, describing the night of the storm, the injuries, the incredible odds overcome. Then each of the 3 patients spoke, sharing their recovery stories and thanking Marcus. Jessica was back in school. Robert's leg was healing ahead of schedule. Tyler had regained full mobility in his neck. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd, and saw Sophie sitting in the front row, beaming at him with such pride that his eyes stung. "I'm not really comfortable with this," Marcus began, and a ripple of laughter went through the room. "I'm not a hero. I keep telling people that, but nobody seems to believe me. What I did on that night, I did because I'm a father, because I thought about my daughter being hurt somewhere, and I thought about wanting someone to help her. That's all." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But if me being here today, if talking about that night encourages even one person to stop and help instead of driving past, then I guess it's worth being uncomfortable, because that's what we should do. Not because it's heroic, but because it's human. Because we're all connected, whether we realize it or not. Those 3 people weren't strangers after I stopped. They were someone's child, someone's father, someone's daughter, just like Sophie is mine." Marcus looked directly at his daughter. "I want my daughter to grow up in a world where people help each other, where stopping isn't exceptional, it's expected, where we don't need ceremonies to recognize basic human decency. So if you want to honor me, don't make me special. Instead, be someone who stops. Be someone who helps. Be someone who sees another person in need and thinks, that could be me. That could be someone I love. That's the real honor. Creating a world where what I did isn't newsworthy because everyone would do it." The applause was thunderous. People were crying. Marcus could see tears on Jessica's face, on Tyler's mother's face, on Dr. Hendricks's face. He stepped away from the podium, overwhelmed, and Sophie ran up to hug him. "That was a good speech, Daddy." "Thanks, baby." After the ceremony, Marcus stood outside the hospital in the late afternoon sun, watching people leave. Tyler approached him one more time. "Mr. Thompson, I know you said you're not a hero, but you're wrong. You're my hero. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be someone who stops, someone who helps, because of you." Marcus shook his hand, then pulled him into a hug. "Make that life count, Tyler. That's all I ask." As Marcus drove home with Sophie, she asked, "Daddy, are you scared about moving to Charlotte?" "A little bit, yeah." "Me too, but we'll be okay, right? Because we're a team?" "Right, we're a team."